And we are live. Hello, my name is Ben Campbell. I am a coach for men specializing in social and dating matters, a little bit of productivity as well. This show is called Off the Cuff. The format is where I take questions from my Discord community, which is discord.gg/self-improvement. If you want to submit a question or call in live to the show and answer them on the stream in like a off the cuff format. So I'll take the first question. Hi Ben, hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. I have a question about a hypothetical situation and would greatly appreciate your advice. Imagine a 23-year-old man who is currently working a wage job as a cleaner in a warehouse. He has fallen in love with a woman of an Asian family where the father has very high expectations for his daughter's potential suitor. Expectations like graduating from a prestigious university, having a high-paying job, or being a successful athlete or public figure like being a famous or rich footballer and actor. Okay, so Asian guy with high standards. To add to the complexity, the woman he loves is also very successful, studying to become a surgeon at a top university. Meanwhile, the man doesn't have a stellar background. He has a few minor criminal records from his teenage years, e.g. fights and petty theft, and no significant accomplishments or social media presence. He dropped out of secondary school and spent a few years aimlessly watching anime until he got his first job at 22. Given these circumstances, what advice would you give this young man to potentially gain the approval of his girlfriend's strict father? Thank you for your time and insight. Okay, so even though this is a hypothetical, this is a... I wouldn't say this exact scenario happens very often, but the whole like Asian family stereotype thing, or just a father having high standards for who his daughter is going to settle with, I guess that's a reasonably common scenario. I'm probably not the best person to ask about this because my advice for any kind of situation like this, like the it essentially comes down to how would you gain the approval of this person with very high standards. And the first thing that I would say would be fuck him, right? Like if you fall in love with somebody and they fall in love with you and your relationship is good and you're from different backgrounds or whatever, but you guys are happy within the relationship, it's a common stereotype about the in-laws causing problems and all of this stuff. But if the father has unreasonably, let's say, high expectations, and you just can't live up to them, and there's nothing you can do for this person. Like, unless you want to redo your whole life and go to a prestigious university and be someone that you are not in order to impress the parents of the person that you're dating, there's not much you can really do in that situation. And I would personally argue that you shouldn't bother trying. Like, of course you want to treat people cordially and you want to have a good relationship with your girlfriend or wife or whoever's parents. But if that's not something that, like, if they're expecting things from you that you cannot deliver and that they have unreasonable expectations and they don't see you as a human being as much as they do as like an asset to the family, then fuck them. And honestly, in most cases where people are so wildly different, like in this hypothetical scenario, as you put it, like the parents are successful, the child is successful, you're like a janitor at some place that has a criminal record and all of this stuff. The chances of you being even compatible in the first place to date the person with the strict parents who is highly successful are very unlikely because you come from very different backgrounds. And I always say there's three main components that make a good relationship, and this goes for friendships as well. It's connection, chemistry, connection, and compatibility. And chemistry is the ineffable thing. It's like it's the pheromonal stuff. It's the physical attraction. It's the energy that exists between the two of you, the magnetism, let's say. Compatibility, and this is the thing that is probably lacking in these kinds of scenarios, is like how well do your lives fit together? Are you similar kinds of people? Do you have similar goals and all of this stuff? And it's very unlikely that these two people would even be interested in each other on a compatibility level in the first place. And in connection, which is arguably one of the most important things, but that's built over time. And so yeah, in this hypothetical scenario, it's very unlikely that these people would even be compatible or interested in each other. And if they were, who gives a fuck what the parents think? Like, frankly, at some point, like if you're of a sort, you say 23, this guy's 23, so I'm assuming the girl's of a similar age. Like you're adults at that point. If you want to hold a relationship, if it's some scenario where the parents are like, we're gonna cut you off if you date this guy, it's not up to them, it's up to the pair of you. And so in this hypothetical scenario, yeah, fuck them. I don't think you should ever be, I'm a fairly disagreeable person, I guess, but I don't think that you should ever be trying to seek the approval of other people, whether it be people that you're trying to date or whether it be their family members. Be yourself, act in a way that is good and authentic to you, and if they don't like it, fuck them, and find people that do. You don't have to have the approval of your girlfriend's parents, and yes, it can be far more difficult if you don't. It's not a good scenario. It's not a good scenario in the first place. So it's unlikely that these two people would ever actually want to be together, and that the relationship would actually last unless there's other factors here that you haven't mentioned that would create compatibility between the two. And B, if it were to the extent where they wanted to settle down together or whatever, they shouldn't be looking for the approval of the parents. They're adults at that point. And yes, having that approval would make things better, and ideally you would have that approval, but it's a guessing game. But to get to the real meat of your question on how to gain this person's approval, don't you should never be trying to gain other people's approval. You should live authentically to yourself and do the things that you want to do, and you will naturally find people that are compatible with you, that appreciate you for who you are, etc. And trying to build up a personality or be someone that you're not in order to impress other people, doesn't actually make people respect you as much as you would want it to, because they can sense the inauthenticity of it, even on a subconscious level. And B, just makes you like a sort of non-person. It makes you someone that isn't true to themselves. It makes you someone that isn't like the way that you get good relationships and good friendships and good connections is by being someone who is refined, who can go and find people that are actually truly compatible with them. If you never do that, if you never go through that process, you're always someone that exists sort of as a reflection of other people, which is not a healthy way to live, in my opinion. So I hope that answers your hypothetical question. We'll go on to the next one. Same person. Hi, Ben. I have a question about another situation in real life this time, and would greatly appreciate your guidance. I have an 18-year-old friend who just graduated out of high school and suffers from severe social anxiety. He is terrified of stepping into the real world and is perceived by others as weird because he acts a lot like Mr. Bean in social situations. Despite being 6'2" and very good looking, his extreme social awkwardness and lack of personality have made him a social outcast, causing people to avoid him. Due to his anxiety and the negative perception of others, he feels like he just wants to stay indoors all day after graduation and avoid social interactions entirely. He's even considering claiming disability so that he can spend all of his time in his bedroom and avoid the outside world. This is compounded by his very judgmental extended family, who often ask personal questions that feel more like interrogations, making him feel even worse about himself. Given these circumstances, what steps can he take to be less odd, less of a klutz, and improve his social skills and confidence? And how can he cope with his severe social anxiety and the judgmental attitudes of others to start building a more fulfilling social life? Thank you again. All right. Yeah, so this guy's in the kind of situation that a lot of people find themselves in, especially young people these days, that end up becoming like insulated and isolated and on their phones all the time, and just like I think either yourself or someone else asked a question in the past about like being a hikikomori, like a shut-in. You just sort of isolate yourself from society, and this is becoming a far more common problem. I think that social matters and social ability are both a natural thing. Like there's something that we would naturally do, but they're also a skill, and that's like anything else. Like naturally we used to go out and hunt and fish and do other things as well, and there's lots of innate human things that you learn from either society or from genetics. Like it's like an inbuilt programmed part of you, but are also in combination things that you learn from other people, and it sort of folds over to create like a well-balanced human being that can perform well in society. And one of the problems that we have is that in modern society we have all of these conveniences and all of these things that allow us to seek things that emulate stuff that we would be getting naturally. So like pornography will emulate relationships, and social media will emulate friendships, but they do it in a sort of hollow way that ends up like they're both overstimulating and under-satisfying, and so you end up in the position where you're attached to these things in a way that it is giving you what your sort of programming thinks it wants, but at the same time denying you the things that you actually need to be a well-rounded human being. And lots of people find themselves in this position where they end up just becoming completely insulated and isolated because of it, and then social anxiety takes over. As we all have this natural sort of inbuilt voice, so you call it the ego, call it the conscience, call it the inner monologue, whatever you want, but this like social matters are incredibly important to people, especially, and we want to fit into society. And it's to the point where it's like you could take a tribe way out in the middle of nowhere in some place in Africa, and they all dress in a specific way, and they tie their hair in a certain way, and they like wear certain kinds of clothes. And from an outside perspective, that can seem really weird and strange, but inside that society, that's just the thing that people do. And so social contagions and things that sort of tie society together are very unique, and we have a very inbuilt drive to form tribalistic cultures and to emulate the behaviors and the rituals of people around us in order to fit in. Because if you don't fit in and you go against the societal norm, you could end up being an outcast, and people cannot survive on their own, at least not outside of a modern societal. Like nowadays, you could go to job, you could have an online job, or you could go to work and just sort of isolate yourself from people and make money and eat and survive, but be very unhappy, whereas historically that wasn't really a thing. And so we still have this little inbuilt part of us that's constantly telling us to fit in, right? And where social anxiety comes from is when that voice ends up becoming over dominant. So there's this little part of us that says, don't fuck things up. Like, don't talk to people in the wrong way. Don't upset people, or something bad might happen. You might get kicked out. You might get eaten by jaguars. You might starve to death, etc. You want people to like you. And so that little voice comes up and starts telling you, be careful, right? But if you need to challenge it to a certain extent, and it's very healthy to go, no, fuck you, I'm in charge, and make certain decisions like approaching people that you find attractive, or trying to make new friends, or taking risks socially. But if you never do that and you never push past that boundary, that voice ends up dominating, and it becomes social anxiety, and it gets to the point where even completely normal, reasonable things become little fears, because you don't want to step outside of your little status quo. And if your status quo is so regressed from what like normal societal behavior is, you end up becoming someone that's too scared to really do anything in social situations for fear of upsetting people or being around people. And it's also there's like the introvert extrovert thing. I'm personally of the opinion that these are just like, I think people naturally tend towards one or the other, but it's also habit. If you spend all of your time going out and meeting people and talking to people, and you're comfortable with that, and it's something that flows naturally to you, when you spend time alone, if you're not used to doing that, your thoughts can take over. You get anxiety, you get all these things, and so you gain all your energy and you're most comfortable spending time around people, and that's what fulfills you. Whereas on the other side, if you isolate yourself completely from other people, when you're in social situations, that voice again takes over, and you start overthinking all of the things that you're doing, and that can be mentally and emotionally draining when you're in social situations. So that whole introvert extrovert thing, taking kind of two extremes there, I think is just habit. So having covered all of that, the way that you get over, so I'll go back to your question, given these circumstances, what steps can you take to be less odd, less of a klutz, and improve his social skills and confidence? Exposure, and lots of exposure. He needs to go out and talk to as many people as possible and put himself into situations where he feels exposed, where he feels unconfident, where he feels, that anxiety rising up. And over time, two things will happen. One, he'll become more comfortable in social situations. And two, he'll learn how to navigate social situations better. Because you have the experience. It's like, nobody, like I used to be a very, very awkward teen. I used to do really weird things, and people didn't like me, and it was strange. But you learn over time to like, if this person doesn't really have that kind of experience, and let me go back to your question here. Extreme social awkwardness, lack of personality causing people to avoid him. So he doesn't have the practice in place. He is not socialized. He hasn't gone out and spoken to people. He hasn't really had that experience of bouncing off of other people to learn what it is like to hold a conversation, to learn what it is like to actually interface with other people, if you treat it like a skill, right? So if you don't have that experience, you end up acting in strange ways, in ways that people are not used to, and that can then make you go, this guy's weird, this guy's creepy, and avoid. And you have to get over that hurdle. So first of all, he has to acknowledge that people are going to find him weird and creepy and uncomfortable for a while. But the more he goes out and speaks to people, and again, if these people are strangers, who gives a fuck what they think? You're never going to see them again. And get to the point where he's talking to a lot of people and having a lot of experiences, and then eventually it will become like an ingrained skill where A, he becomes more comfortable in these situations, and B, he becomes better at navigating them. So that's the first thing. So that's how he becomes less odd, less of a klutz, improves his social skills and confidence, is through exposure. He needs to do the things that his social anxiety are telling him not to do, until he gets to the point where he's comfortable with them, and then he will get better at them. And this can take a long time, but it's incredibly important. I actually run a 2-day course that is all about exactly this. The first day is it's about exposure. You do a bunch of things in public that your brain is telling you don't do this, and you have a sort of transcendent, you could call it a spiritual or psychedelic experience where you realize that nobody gives a fuck about you. Like, nobody actually cares what you do or what you think. You're just another person in their world. They're all just as internally motivated as you are, and so they're thinking about their own shit, and there's a weird guy over there, and you're gone from their life forever. And once you have that experience, you're like, I can do anything, it doesn't matter. So the first day is all about exposure, and then the second day is, how do I actually make a connection with people? How do I talk to them? How do I get into a conversation? How do I find emotionally rooted things to connect on with people? And when you go through this 2-day experience, you come out of it going, okay, I am now someone who can be social with people. And so that's something that I teach. So yeah, that's the first thing, exposure. Then the second thing, how can he cope with the severe social anxiety and the judgmental attitude of others to start building a more fulfilling social life? It's kind of the same question, but again, he doesn't cope with it. He moves past it. He gets over it. He fixes it, and the only way forward is through. Like, the more you treat social anxiety, the more you treat that little voice in your head as a voice of authority, the worse your situation ends up getting. You need to take control and go, no, I need to change. When that voice comes up, you go, fuck you, I'm in charge, and you go and you do the things that you need to do. And this is difficult. Like, anything in your life is going to have some element of resistance behind it, and that same voice comes up, whether it be social situations, whether it be going to the gym, whether it be starting new habits and hobbies. That your mind, your ego wants you to stay in a status quo situation. It doesn't really care if you're unhappy. It cares that you survive. And anything outside of your comfort zone, anything outside of your sort of reference point of normality, will seem scary by comparison, because you have this little voice in your head coming up with excuses and telling you why you can't do those things. And it'll come up with reasons that seem very convincing but are complete bullshit. It's like, oh, don't go talk to that person because they'll think you're weird. And then the real fear at the end of the day is that everybody will hate you and you'll become a social outcast, and that never fucking happens. Or like, you don't need to go to the gym today, you're tired or whatever. And even though for months you're like, I want to build a strong muscular body, your mind is telling you, you don't need to, whatever, just stay within your lane. Just, it's all fine. But the more that you challenge that voice, and the more you go, fuck you, I'm in charge, it eventually starts to work for you. So you become the person that works out every day. You become the person that approaches people and talks to them. You become social and confident and charismatic, and your status quo changes, and the things that you are used to changes, and your like state of normal becomes a new state of normal, and that voice will then start to reinforce that. So to try and bring this rant all together and turn it into like a cohesive thing to answer your question, this person is in this situation from lack of exposure to normal social interactions with people. And the way that you get over that is by pushing yourself past the fear and the anxiety and all of this stuff, and realizing that it's bullshit and it's just a voice in your head that wants you to not change, right? And force yourself to change, and force yourself to be in situations and go out and talk to people where you get to the point where you move past the anxiety and realize that little voice isn't correct, and B, change your state to the point where you get used to talking to people and you become more competent at it. And then as a byproduct of that little voice will start to reinforce those new behaviors. And I think I talked about this before. There's like a pattern of, and I wrote a post about this. It's called Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. It's like the way that we work is we have thoughts, actions, and consequences, or rewards, or whatever you want to call it, like the outcomes. And the thoughts influence the way that you behave, the behaviors influence the results that you get, and the results then influence your thoughts. And you can target either the way that you think or the way that you act. And I say you should target both at the same time. And then that influences the results that you get, which then feed back into your internal sense of self and your beliefs and everything like that. So for this guy specifically, the thoughts are, I can't talk to these people, I can't do that, I'm an outcast, people think I'm weird, blah, 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 blah. And I'm saying, recognize that that's bullshit. First of all, recognize that these thoughts are just thoughts. They're not real, that they're not necessarily correct. Target the actions as well, and start doing things which will bring results which go against those thoughts. And then the whole thing changes, and you start to spiral into a new reality where you are a socially competent, confident person. I hope that helps. Next question. I'll answer that one a bit later. Hi, Ben. I've been reflecting on a pattern in my behavior that's been bothering me for a while, and I'm hoping you can offer some insight. As someone with autism, I often find myself adopting the personality traits, mannerisms, and opinions of other people I interact with. This seems to be a way for me to connect and be more likable, but it leaves me feeling like I don't have a stable sense of who I am. I feel like I'm constantly adapting to the personalities of those around me to the point where I'm not sure what my true personality is anymore. I've recently come to realize that this pattern extends to how I form opinions and make decisions as well. I sometimes catch myself defending viewpoints or pursuing interests that I initially embraced because someone else was enthusiastic about them rather than because they truly resonate with me. This has led me to confusion about my own beliefs and preferences, and I often find myself questioning whether my thoughts and opinions are genuinely mine or just reflections of those around me. I believe my autism plays a role in this, as my tendency to mimic others can be a way of coping with social interactions and masking my differences. Is this experience common among people on the autism spectrum? How can I begin to develop a clearer sense of my own identity and opinions? Any advice on how to distinguish between my authentic self and the influences I've absorbed from others would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for your help. So first of all, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a psychologist in any way. I do not have experience as being an autistic person, despite what some people in my life have told me. And so I can't really speak to the autism part of this. I have friends who are autistic. I have coached people who are autistic, but I can only really speak to the generalized human experience and my own experience on these matters. So with that out of the way, I think like what you're talking about is something that pretty much everybody experiences. They might not be aware that this is what's happening, but everybody goes through this sort of process that you're describing, where they will either mirror what other people are doing, or they'll take in things from other sort. Like the way that we learn and the way that we function and the way that we interact with the outside world is that we experience it and then we integrate it and then we decide and we filter it through our thoughts and beliefs and everything, and then we have an output as well. So for example, like I have gone through periods where it's like, oh, now I'm really interested in Warhammer, and now I'm really interested in this kind of game, and now I'm really interested in like the social matters, and now I'm really interested in this and that and whatever. And people's enthusiasm can rub off on you, and it's not a bad thing. It's not unreasonable, and it's not abnormal for you to gain new interests based on things that other people are talking about. This is just sort of how people work. We're very social creatures, and everything that we have and everything we do, even the language that we're speaking and the thoughts that our capability to have thoughts and discuss things and the technology that we have, everything is built upon things that other people have done in the past. And it starts from a little point and it spirals out in every direction. This is just how we function as a species. You can think of us sort of as like bees, where we think of ourselves as individuals, but we are also a collective, and we create things in society as a collective. And so there's nothing inherently wrong or bad about picking up things from other people and integrating them into yourself. It doesn't mean that you lack a sense of identity. The thing that gives you a unique identity are the things that you are personally choosing to attach yourself to. So like you see things from 10 different sources that are 10 wildly different things that are like hobbies or interests or whatever, and you choose to become interested in some of those, and then you are now interested in that thing, and then you start doing that thing. Nothing wrong with that. That's just standard human behavior. And I think, because I've talked a lot in the past about, you need to be authentic, you need to be true to yourself. Again, the thing that creates that is your individual experience and your individual filtering of those things. So you might take in an opinion from somebody else, and then you think about that and you reference it to your experiences and your thoughts, and you sort of dissect it a little bit, and then you might have your own nuanced opinion on that thing, and someone else has probably had that opinion before. Like, there's nothing new under the sun, as they say. But you can take that and integrate it and be like, okay, now this is my thought and my belief or whatever. It's like everything that I've learned in self-improvement has been a combination of things that I've pulled in from other sources. Like, I started reading and going to seminars and watching videos and stuff when I was 14, right? This is, again, almost no, can't be. Yeah, almost like 15 years ago now. 13, 14 years. I'm bad at math, whatever. Like a long time ago. And over time, it's like I went from someone who was just taking things in to someone who started to integrate and practice, to then someone who has my own, like I can start to solve problems now based on the input that I've taken. So it's like if you're programming a machine, you give it lots of inputs, you program it, like let's think of AI now, like large language models and stuff, even though they're not conscious, but you feed it a lot of information, and then it will regurgitate that and form it into its own thing and spit it back at you, right? And this is how our minds work as well. We take things in, we integrate them, and then we regurgitate them in some way. So again, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing that makes you a unique individual is your just affinity with those things, and it's a completely arbitrary thing. Like your authentic personality is whatever feels the best and is most right to you. When I say that people are being inauthentic, and especially in social situations, and we'll get back to the first part of your question, because that changes my answer a little bit. The thing that makes you authentic in social situations is that, say someone says something and your opinion, your belief, your way of being is different from what they're talking about. You would disagree. You would go, I don't feel like that way about that. Or you just wouldn't act in a way that doesn't feel natural to you based on all of the things that you fed yourself and the person that you have decided to become, right? The thing that would make that inauthentic is if you then molded yourself to that other person. Now, everybody does this a little bit to a certain extent, right? Like everybody's a little bit different around their parents as they are around their friends, as they are, and well, maybe not everybody. Like you can get to the point, and I believe I have got to the point where I am the same person around everyone. Like I am me all of the time. My mood might affect the way that I act, but who I am around doesn't really affect the way that I act. But that is because I guess the more that you do this, the more that you go through that process, the more that you integrate things, the more that you start to refine the balance point of where you are happiest, and the point at which you're like, okay, this is me. These are my traits. These are my likes. These are my dislikes. And these things are open to change, and they should be open to change. You can't be too rigid all of the time, but you're not very easily swayed when someone else comes along. Does that make sense? Let me read your question. I've been reflecting on a pattern in my behavior that's been bothering me. I find myself adopting personality traits, mannerisms, and so it could be, and again, I'm not a psychiatrist, so you need to ask yourself this question and see how well this resonates with you. It could be that you are just not at a point yet where you have had enough unique experiences to really. Because it's like, if you're the statue of David, right? You're Michelangelo's David, but you still got lots of rough bits of marble on you. You haven't chipped everything away yet to really refine who you are, and so you're still going through the process of finding things and latching onto things and integrating them. And that's like it's a play. It's a exploratory experience. Like there's something that the actor, what's his name, Jim Carrey, said once. He's like, he realized somewhere along the way from playing so many different people and doing so many different roles that the real true essence of who Jim Carrey was didn't really exist. And he was just, even when he was being Jim Carrey, he was playing a person. And if you want to get into the spiritual side of this, maybe this will help you, maybe it'll make you more like confused, but I've had this conversation with friends recently. It's like the only real thing, the only thing that is actually you is the consciousness. It's the thing that is experiencing, and everything else that's built on top of that is completely arbitrary, and it's the summation of your experiences and your belief systems, which again are from your experiences, and the thing, and your thoughts, and all of that stuff that's built on top, all of the thing that you call you. So all of the stuff that I call Ben is just a story, right? It's really all it is at the end of the day. It's a story and it's actions. It's the things that I do and it's the things that I believe. And it's the same for yourself and it's the same for everybody. So I wouldn't get too caught up in thinking like, who am I? And having like a spiritual crisis, as much as I would start asking myself, who do I want to be? Right? What excites me? What makes me feel good? What do I think is correct behavior and correct thinking and correct action? And this is arbitrary. This is going to be personal to every different person. Like it's not something that is objectively true. There is no who you are beyond what you define it to be. So don't get too caught up in I'm mirroring other people all the time. Perhaps that is just that you're still trying to refine who you are. And instead, rather than getting worried about this and focusing on like finding who you are, focus on deciding who you are and exploring the world and integrating things and becoming like a person with your own thoughts and opinions and everything else. Because the more that you do that, the more the sort of range will narrow until you eventually find that point where you feel authentic. I hope that makes sense and answers your question. That's about as best the answer as I can give. It's arbitrary. It's up to you. Who you are is entirely up to you. And when I talk about behaving authentically in situations and not just copying and mirroring other people, what I mean by that is that you've gotten to a point where you've built a sense of self, and that you're not allowing it to be super swayed by other people for the purpose of pleasing those people or making them like you. That's what's most important, right? Because once you get to that point and you find the things that you like and you find the things that feel right for you, if you not become locked in it, because again, everything changes all the time, you should be open to change and open to taking in new opinions. But you get to the point where you have a very keen and refined sense of your own identity. And then you look for people that are compatible with that, and you start to build a life around that. And it's all about personal choice. It's all about personal choice. It's all arbitrary. You are whoever you say you are, and you are the summation of your thoughts and your choices and your actions and the people that you spend time with. And treat it like a game. It's you are an RPG character. If you're building it from scratch, you're building it from scratch. You can be whatever you want to be. I hope that answers it. Someone asks here, how do I stay consistent and do what I planned to do the previous day? And how do I create a successful routine? Okay, so I've talked about this a little bit before, and I actually have a post. Again, discord.gg/self-improvement. There's a bunch of forums in there, and there's a bunch of posts that you can go and read for free, where I've essentially put down my life's work into writing. And there is one in the behavioral forum that is called, let me find it. Yeah, morning and evening routines for success. So I'm someone that has, like, doctors would diagnose me with ADHD, right? And I'm fairly inattentive. I'm a very difficult to motivate person unless it's something that I'm super interested in. And I have really struggled in the past, and I still have periods where I struggle with productivity. But despite saying that, I feel like I've unlocked a lot of the answers to that. And if these things work for me as someone who really struggles to like get going and get shit done, I feel like if they work for me, they work for anybody. So this is let me go back to the question. This is what I would say is the solution to A, being consistent and doing what you plan and having a successful routine, which is essentially the three elements of your question. So consistency, first of all, is habit. It's if you doing anything, and again, I have a post on habits if you want to read that, like how the brain wires itself to form habits and how forming habits can become easier for you. If you do the same thing every day, eventually it gets to the point where it becomes easier, and then it gets to the point where your brain starts to tell you to do that. Like with, hopefully, for most of you, if your parents did a good job, every evening and every morning you think, oh, I'm going to brush my teeth now, and you just go and brush your teeth. And it's not really like a conscious process. It's just something that you do. It's a part of you. It's an ingrained, natural, normal behavior. And ideally, this is the point that you want to get to with all of the things that you want to create in your life. And the real one of the best things that I've ever done for increasing my level of productivity, consistency, and willpower is A, to understand how these things work and where they come from. Like there's certain areas of your brain that you can strengthen over time, and certain systems that you can strengthen over time through certain behaviors. And the main thing that I noticed is to try to not overstimulate myself. So if you wake up in the morning and you look at your phone, you start checking notifications, and you do things that stimulate you and give you dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is responsible for not only motivation, but also it is both the influence and the reward for certain behaviors, and it helps to form pathways in the brain. And there are a lot of things that we have in modern society now, even down to like, you know, food, pornography, social media, like all of these things that give our brain really easy sources of dopamine, which helps to wire our brain in a way where the things that we want to do are not necessarily conducive to our like these systems should be motivating us to go out and have sex with people and create babies and like build a fire and cook food and hunt and like do all the things that are necessary for our survival. But they've become hijacked by systems that give us a much easier source of dopamine, that are not natural systems, that sort of fuck us up and leave us feeling like we're unable to do any of the things that we would normally do. So it's like, if you want to get up and sit down to work, if the first thing you do is open up your phone and like scroll YouTube or TikTok or whatever, you're giving yourself such a higher amount of this reward that anything else by comparison feels like bullshit. It's like you don't want to do it. You can't really bring yourself the motivation to do it, right? So the main thing that I talk about is don't overstimulate yourself before doing any of the things that you want to do. So if you want to be consistent, you want to stick to the plan. Say you make a plan the previous day. You're like, I want to do this tomorrow and I want to do this. When you wake up, like I don't check I mean, I sometimes check my phone, but I try not to do anything that I call non-productive entertainment before 5 p.m. in the day. So I won't scroll TikTok Reels or Instagram Reels or anything like that. I'll try to avoid social media. I might not even listen to music or podcasts. Like I'll avoid anything that I see as like entertainment or as I put it, non-productive entertainment, because I'll let myself read a book or play guitar or go for a walk or whatever. Like I don't necessarily have to work. I just push all of that shit to the end of the day. And just by doing that, I find that if I get up and I'm just walking around, I'm like, I want to do some work. And then I'll sit and I'll do some work and I'll write something or I'll edit a video or I'll work on some sort of project or something. Because your brain is always looking for something to give it a source of dopamine. It's looking for something to give it a reward that it will then motivate you to do. And the lower your threshold for what that reward is, the more motivated you will feel to do it. So if you're constantly stimulating yourself, like if the first thing you do is get up in the morning and jack off, you're not going to feel very motivated afterwards because you've given yourself such a massively heightened amount of like, think of it in terms of stimulation. The less you stimulate yourself earlier in the day, the more productive and the more capable you will be of doing the things that you want to do. It's also habit as well. Like there's a part of your brain, I believe. Let's just say prefrontal cortex. So prefrontal cortex is the area of your brain that's responsible for like it's like the brain of your brain. It controls all of the other areas, and it maybe correct me if I'm wrong or look into this. I believe I'm correct. It sort of inhibits your impulses and it's the bit of you that when you're like, oh, I just want to go do this, it's the bit that takes controls and prevents you from doing that. You can build this up over time and strengthen it by doing difficult things. So on a perfect day for me, I'll wake up, I have an ice bath in my bathroom that I'll sit in for 3 minutes, and that massively boosts up my level of available dopamine so that I find tasks like sitting and working more stimulating. But I'll get up, I'll do that. It's not only very hard, so I have to go, fuck, I have to get in this cold water. I really don't want to do it. I'll go and sit in the cold water, everything boosts up, I feel amazing afterwards, and it strengthens that part of my brain that fights against impulses and makes me do shit that I don't want to do. I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. Very rarely do I actually want to go to the gym, but I push myself and I go, okay, I'm going to do it. And over time it gets easier because that part of my brain is strengthening and those pathways are strengthening. So to get away from my ramble and go back to your question, how to stay consistent and do what you planned the previous day. Do not overstimulate yourself. Do your best to give yourself as little artificial stimulation as possible. So don't listen to music, don't watch YouTube videos, don't get on TikTok or Reels, like don't be fucking checking your notifications in the morning. Preferably keep your phone off unless you need it, and keep it off until like 5 p.m. Buy yourself a regular alarm clock and allow yourself to be bored, and then you will find sources of stimulation that are normally way lower on the pole, like working or forming habits or doing the things that you want to do that are not like fun, entertainment, cheap sources of stimulation. You will find those so much easier after the fact because you've not jacked this system way up to put the bar up here. Like the lower the bar, the easier it is to get shit done. And in creating a successful routine, I would say there's 2 elements of a successful routine. The first is the stuff that you do in the morning to set yourself up for the day. And then the second is the stuff that you do in the evening to wind down. And again, I have a post, it's called Morning and Evening Routines, where it goes into this a little bit better. I'm a better writer than I am a talker. And I would say in the morning, like people inflate these routines. They're like, oh, I get up and then I do this and then I do that and then I read for an hour and then I meditate, and it's like, yeah, but what are you actually getting done, right? Like if you're someone that has things that you want to be doing, your morning routine should be as small as possible an amount of time. And just like the perfect balance of saving time and setting you up to do the things that you actually want to do. So you don't need to read in the morning, you don't need to meditate in the morning, you don't need to journal in the morning. In fact, I do most of these things in the evening to actually wind down. But like, say for me, I want to get up and I want to write a post, right? I have found, like, I will try to take as few of these habits as possible, like just necessary things before I start work. So I wake up, I get some sunlight on a good day. I get some sunlight. I take an ice bath, which jacks up my fucking and again, it's not it's not like stimulation, it's more like giving you more available motivation and willpower to use, because it jacks up your level of dopamine. So I take an ice bath, and then I sit down and I start writing, and I remove all distractions, and I stimulate myself as little as possible before then. And this is maybe 30 minutes to an hour into the day. On a good day, I start writing. Perfect. Amazing morning routine. Once you've done like 3 or 4 hours of work or the things that you want to do, then you can do whatever the fuck you want. Then you can do your reading, your journaling, your meditating, whatever. But like the whole like morning routines for success, your morning routine should be as simple as possible. Like if you don't want or need to do the ice bath, like if you're not someone that really struggles with motivation and you don't need it to get started, like there are people that just get up, they roll out of bed and they immediately start working. Great. I think getting some sunlight in the morning is really important because I struggle with sleep. So if I get out and I get the sun, it regulates my circadian rhythm. I sleep a lot better, which makes me more effective the rest of the time. I consider that to be an absolutely necessary thing. But the fewest things that you can do, the better. If you can just get up and immediately start work when that threshold for stimulation is at its lowest, that's when you're going to be the most productive, right? And then in the evening, so I think sleep is one of the most important things. So consistent sleep and healthy sleep, right? In the evening, I turn off all the shit that, like, all the screens, any sources of like blue light or things that are going to disrupt me. I turn off at maybe like I go to bed around 10 or 11, so I'll turn these off at 9 or 10. And then I might like clean up my apartment, do any dishes that are left over, start like winding myself down and putting myself in a relaxed space, and then I'll read a book, and then I'll fall asleep after brushing my teeth or whatever. So it's like in the morning, give yourself as little stimulation as possible so that you can start work. And then in the evening, give yourself as little stimulation as possible and wind down so that you sleep well. And then wake up at the same time every day. Like don't be going out fucking staying up till 4 a.m, because I can ruin your sleep for a whole week. And then if you practice this, so if you have a good morning set up and a good evening wind down, you'll find that after a couple of weeks of doing this, your energy levels are higher, your motivation levels are higher, and it's easier to stick to the things you want to do. Because in the spirit of your question, you're like, how do I do the things that I want to do, essentially, that aren't stimulating for me? And it really comes down to that. Set yourself up well. Don't expect that you can get up and be like, I'll do it later, and watch a couple hours of YouTube and then work, because the bar, like the amount of stimulation is way higher. And so the thing that you actually want to do, which is down here, seems so much more boring by comparison. Whereas if you wake up and you're here, suddenly this is exciting. Does that make sense? It's all about the reference point that you're coming from and the level of stimulation that you're used to. And there's a lot of talk about like dopamine detox and shit like this. And it's like dopamine is not a toxin. It's something that is necessary for your motivation. Think of it in terms of stimulation. Give yourself as little stimulation as possible beyond what is necessary to do the things that you want to do. And those tasks will then become stimulating as a result. If you jack up your level of stimulation, you do things that are very easy, that give very high, like, you know, neural reward, whatever, like watching YouTube videos, things that are entertaining but have no real substance to them, you're artificially massively inflating the level of stimulation you have, and anything that is mundane will seem super boring by comparison. There's fuck all you can do to actually do it after that, unless you're the kind of person that just has endless motivation and willpower, which is rare. But think about it is that when you wake up in the morning, you have a certain amount of motivation and willpower. And the sooner you can get into like a workflow state and not allow yourself to deplete that level of motivation and willpower, the better. I hope that answers your question. So I've done that one. And I am missing my emotional support Anton today. He is out in Thailand doing very fun things, but I find I'm looking forward to having people calling in, because I think, like, I'm very good at talking, not necessarily in being eloquent and succinct, but very good at rambling for a long time on a topic. And I think it's helpful to either have someone like Anton on the call with me, who can like interject and talk about things and also set me up for different rants, but also to sort of keep me on topic, because I find like answering these questions, I might go on for half an hour when I could have answered the thing in 5 minutes. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, I don't know. But at some point there is, if you want to call in, you can go to discord.gg/self-improvement, and there is a section there called off the cuff submissions, and then there's a little button there that says call in. You can apply to like call in live to the show, because I think having people to bounce off of will make this a lot better. And I also think answering people's questions in that format is just gonna be more fun. I like having somebody to talk to. Okay, another question. How do I know if a woman is being genuinely interested in me or just being polite? Okay, this is a fairly good question, because I think back into dating topics. there's a massive difference between how men and women express interest or what's natural. I think, and again, when I talk about things like this and I say men and women, I generally mean masculine and feminine, and men will tend more towards the masculine end of the spectrum, and women will tend more towards the feminine end of the spectrum. There are exceptions to all of this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. This is just what naturally happens in this sort of spectrum. So men, like, we are the masculine is the penetrative force in society. It's the push forward, it's the sword, it's the, and then the feminine is the receptive, it's the chalice, it's the water against the fire and whatever, right? And these forces are certainly at play. Like, you can talk all you want about feminism and everybody being perfectly the same, but it's just it's not like that. Men exhibit certain traits and behaviors, women exhibit different traits and behaviors, and there is balance to be found there. But in dating, it is the masculine responsibility to initiate. It's the guy, like, everybody sort of understands this on some level. It's the guy that goes up and says, hey, you're really cute, let's go out sometime. And then it's the woman, as the receptive, as the feminine, either accepts or rejects, right? And we sort of understand this as men, but it can be very difficult for us to actually do it, which is why I have a job. But how do I know if a woman is genuinely interested? The signs that men and women give off tend to be very different. Men tend to be more overt with their interest, so it's more like if they actually have the balls to talk about it, and that's a different story. But in an ideal world, men tend to be more overt, and they express their interest openly and they talk about it, whereas women tend to be more covert in their signals of interest. So a woman might be flirting with you all night, and if you're not conscious of how different people's behaviors work, and you're not good at picking up on subtle social cues, you might not recognize. So, like, yeah, maybe the man's responsibility to go up and talk to someone and express interest and say, hey, are you interested in going out? But before that happened, the woman might be looking at him from across the bar, or drop something hoping that he'll pick it up and give it to her, or like doing very subtle things to try and start a conversation. So they might actually initiate. They just won't initiate in a way that is necessarily easy to pick up on. And so the way that you learn how to pick up on these things, it's like if you're the kind of person that is just really bad at picking up on social cues, then ask. There's absolutely nothing wrong with, and I've had conversations with guys that go on dates as well, and they're like, well, how do I escalate, and how do I go in for the kiss, and I'm scared to make a move. What if she's not interested? And it's like, well, if she's stuck around that long, she's probably interested. But there's also nothing wrong with saying, I really want to kiss you right now. Is that okay? Or I really want to take you out on a date. How do you feel about that? Or let's do this, or let's do that. Or just asking, can I do this? How do you feel about this? There's nothing emasculine about stating your interest, right? What's emasculine, or what people worry about with getting and get insecure about? They're like, oh, well, I can't just say this, I can't just do this. Is A, if they fear rejection, or B, they have this conflation between a healthy expression of interest and an insecure or vulnerable expression of interest. So there's a very big difference between, I really want to kiss you right now, how do you feel about that? And, hey, I've been thinking, yeah, we've been on this date for a while, and I'm kind of feeling like I want to kiss you, but only if you want to. Like, if you'd find that disgusting, then maybe we shouldn't. Do you see the difference here? So how do I know if a woman is genuinely interested? A, practice. Like, if you spend enough time around women, or just people in general, you start to pick up on subtle social cues and like body language and certain behavior, and you start to understand what certain things mean and how people are feeling. And like, I'm very good at going into a place in public and knowing how people feel by their facial expressions and what they're talking about. Over text, completely impossible. And I'm autistically communicative about, like, how do you feel? What's happening here? What's doing this? Where do we stand? But in person, much easier to pick up on that stuff, right? So part of it is practice. The more you expose yourself in social situations, the more you are around people that are not necessarily overtly telling you how they feel, the more that you will pick up on that. But if you're not sure, absolutely nothing wrong with asking. How do I know if a woman's genuinely interested? You ask her. You go, hey, I'm picking up a vibe here. Are we vibing? I'm interested in you. Are you interested in me? Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And again, there's a whole forum in the Discord called Social, where I go into all of the social dating and marriage. Like, this is my bread and butter. This is what I began as a coach, was a social and dating coach. So that is the advice that I am best with. All right, another question. I am having an issue being honest with people. It feels wrong every time I sneak in a lie, but I get away with it in the end. What are some ways this could affect me negatively? What are some ways I can get away with it? Okay. I mean, first of all, I'd ask yourself, why are you being dishonest with people? Like, what are you gaining from being dishonest with people, and why do you feel that you can't be honest? And if it's morally dubious behavior, I mean, I'm personally someone that believes in karma, but I can't tell you what you should and shouldn't believe. But yeah, I think it's wrong to lie. I mean, there are certain situations where omitting information or not being completely honest with people can be warranted. But with the vast majority of people, all the most like I don't have enough context here to answer the question properly. But I'm going to translate this into a social thing and assume that you're not being honest with people because you want them to have a certain opinion of you. So it says, I feel wrong every time I sneak in a lie, but I always get away. Like, it doesn't say you're stealing. It doesn't say that you're like doing anything to take things from people besides the truth. So I'm going to just assume, based on the lack of information that I've been given here, that you're sort of lying to people in social situations to represent yourself as someone that you're not. And the way that this will affect you negatively is people will, even if not immediately, at some point pick up on it, and at some point they will catch you out, and then you'll become known as someone who is not trustworthy, which is not a good thing. But if you're behaving in a way that isn't authentic, like I often get asked, like, how do I avoid seeming weird, or how do I avoid seeming creepy? And there's a post on this. I can't remember what it's called, but there's creepy in the title. If you are like, if you have a certain internal state and you're feeling a certain way, but your actions and the things that you're saying, the things that you're doing are not in congruence with that, if they're not aligned with that, people will pick up on it. They might not know that that's what they're picking up on, and they might not consciously be aware that that's what's happening, but on a subconscious level, people are very adept at picking up on things socially, and they will understand on some level that there's something wrong. And usually how that manifests in their thinking is, I can't trust this person, or this person seems weird, or this person seems creepy. And even if you're very good at it, and you're kind of like a narcissistic, like I've met people who are very, very good liars, but they're very good liars because they are compulsive liars, and they themselves sort of even believe the lies that they're telling, and so that can create a sort of authenticity in your lies in a weird way. But even people like that, like I've had friends like that in the past, and eventually people catch on, and so it's like you meet these people that this is their default behavior, and they're like, I lie to people and I tell people I am something that I'm not. And like the guy that I knew specifically, he's in his 40s. He pretends he's in his 30s, but he's in his 40s. And he was always surrounded by people. He always had lots of friends, but they were all new friends. And it was always like, oh, yeah, I met him 2 months ago, or yeah, I met him 3 weeks ago, or this or that. And he was always surrounded by people because he was a very charismatic guy. But eventually, everyone in his life caught on that the things he was saying were not true. And he was a little bit of a sociopath, and a little bit of a narcissist, and a little bit of a compulsive liar that was just speaking bullshit. And you'd catch him out on things. And then eventually, everybody left his life. And so if you're that kind of person, you just end up with, like, you can be very charismatic and all of these things, but you'll just end up in situations where people leave your life. All your friends are gone, and you have to constantly make new friends. You can never form lasting relationships because people know you for a liar, right? And beyond just like the moral implications of lying to people. But if you're doing it from a sense of like, I want people to like me, again, and this is something that I talk about a lot, this is something that I teach in my courses and programs and stuff, you have to learn that in order to get the best friendships, in order to get the best relationships, it's not about making people like you. It's about finding people who like who you are. So you refine your personality, you become someone who is attractive and interesting through going out and having experience and refining yourself to the point where you know what you like and you dislike and all of these things. And then from there, you treat social situations as, I am going to go out and find compatible people. Not, I'm going to go out and make people like me. Not, I'm going to go out and convince people that I am someone that I'm not. I'm going to go out exactly as I am, comfortable with myself. And again, we can go through all this stuff about confidence and authenticity and all of that, and find people that like me for who I am. And people that do that are the people that have the best relationships, the best friendships, and all of this stuff. So really, like the person that you are disservicing the most by lying to people and deceiving people and pretending to be someone that you're not is yourself. Because you'll end up with shallow relationships, shallow friendships, and just like an unhappy, unfulfilled social and dating life. You might get results in the short term, but those results never last. What can I do to make women see past my looks and value my personality? Okay. Again, short question with no context. I'm not sure if you're asking because you think you're ugly or because you think you're very attractive. And so the thing can happen on both sides, where it's like if you're a very unattractive person, it can be difficult to get people to give you a chance to actually express your self in a decent way so that they can get to know you. And vice versa, if you're a very attractive person, it can be hard to filter the people that are interested in you to get to the point where you're meeting people that are truly compatible. Because you can have like a lot of very short-term things. And again, the people on the other end of that spectrum will think that you're living the dream, but it can also be very isolating because you're like, well, everybody in my life only values me for my looks. And so there's two sides to that. I'm going to assume, because this is the position that most people are coming from, that you are unattractive, and you're wondering how you can get to the point where women are treating you better. And my main advice for that is get the fuck off of dating apps and meet people in person. So a lot of guys have, and you know, black pill and red pill and the fucking pickup and all this stuff. A lot of people have this understanding or false assumption that women care what you look like. And yeah, I'm phrasing this badly. That one of the most important factors to women is what you look like. And again, going back to what I said earlier, I'm generalizing a little bit here. There are people that will break this exception, but men tend to care a lot more about a woman's physical appearance. And women, while they might care about a man's physical appearance, care way more about how you make them feel. And you'll find plenty of examples of smoking hot women dating objectively ugly guys, because that guy has a great personality, makes her feel good. There are women that only care about how you look, and they're very vain and shallow, but generally women care a fuck of a lot less about it. They might value it, and they might say that it's something that's very important to them, but when it actually comes down to it, and there are studies that even show this, women will rate men as more physically attractive when they like their personality. So a woman might become friends with a guy or start dating a guy that she's like, you know, he's not very attractive, whatever, and then she becomes to like grow attached to him as who he is as a person, and then finds him physically more attractive because of that. And so I would say, first of all, get the idea out of your head that these things matter. Like, will being attractive and tall and muscular and all these things help you? Absolutely, right? It's a massive boon. It is an advantage. But if you don't have these things, are you fucked? No, it's just harder for you, and that really sucks. Like, I'm not here to say like, oh, just fucking suck it up, whatever. It's not fair that things exist like that, but we do live in a world where aesthetics are important. Now, you can still have fulfilling relationships and great friendships, and you can even date models and really attractive people, even if you're very physically unattractive, if you work on the things that are actually important to most women, which is who you are as a person, your capability, your emotional fucking stability, your ability to like provide for them, not necessarily even in like a material way, but just as a person, like to connect on an intimate level, and to have a refined personality, to have good friends around you. And so I would say, work on your personality, become attractive, become interesting internally, and then get the fuck away from anything like Tinder, for example. It's like the top 10% of guys on Tinder are the ones that are actually getting success. Everybody else is sitting there like, am I ugly? This is not working for me. And it's because you're competing on that level. Like these apps like Tinder and Bumble and all this stuff, they're based entirely off of vanity. The most important thing about that is how you look. So if you're not an exceptionally good looking guy, you're going to get mid to no results on these apps. And the reason that we use them is because we're too afraid to go out and actually talk to people. So get the fuck off of those, because they'll be ruining your perception of yourself. And again, work on all this shit. Become charismatic, become interesting, become outgoing and confident. And we can help with all these things, and taking a course will help you with all these things. But get to the point where you're going and talking to people in real life, and walk up to women that you find attractive and say, hey, I find you really attractive. Would you like to go out on a date with me? Right? And one of two things is going to happen. Most likely they'll say no. Great, fine, you move on, right? And again, I have posts on this, I've talked about it in the past, I'm not going to go into it right now, but rejections really doesn't fucking matter when you get down to it. It's not personal at all, it doesn't mean anything, right? And then, but you get to the point where, because you're saying, how do I get them to look past my looks and value my personality? Have conversations, right? Get to the point where you're talking to people and meeting people and allowing them to see that part of you. And then people that are compatible with you will end up falling in love with you. They'll end up appreciating you for who you are. So if you want to get past it, like don't get away from sources where your looks are at the forefront. And it's like I've said this in the past, and Anton and I have talked about this in a previous call. Like, if you're the kind of guy like myself, like him, like any of my clients, that go out and talk to people in the street and do quote cold approach, even though I don't like using these pick-uppy terms because I like to separate myself from that world. If you're the kind of person that goes and talks to people in real life, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's so much easier because no one is doing it. The only people that are approaching women, besides like honest, authentic guys, like the very small minority of people that have come across my work or my old partner's work, The only people that are doing that are crazy people that don't understand the implications of their actions and make women uncomfortable, or pickup artists that don't care about the implications of their actions and make women uncomfortable. So if you're someone that is honest, and again, I have posts on this, it's why you should make approaches, how to make a good approach, approaching mindsets and next steps, etc. There's all for free. You can go and read all this stuff. I also have a video on the main channel about pickup and why that's all fucked up. If you're the kind of person that's going out and meeting people in real life, you set yourself so, and I've had guys on boot camps that are, no offense to these guys, objectively bad looking, right? That get like 3 phone numbers in the first day and end up on a date, and then they're like, oh, I lost my virginity last week after 4 days of doing this. And it's like, yeah, because you're actually going out and trying. So ignore the idea that your looks are actually holding you back. That they're like, if you have really good looks, it's a massive advantage, but not having good looks is not something that should hold you back, right? You go out, you meet people, you accept rejection, you find people that are genuinely compatible with you, you allow yourself to express your personality to people and find people that are compatible with it, and then you get to the point where it's like, if you walk up to a woman and at first she might be like, oh, this guy's a little bit, like if you're really ugly, she might honestly be like, oh, this guy's a bit weird. But if she gives you a chance and then starts talking to you and then she likes who you are as a person, you become physically attractive to her, and all of that shit doesn't matter anymore. So express yourself, get out, talk to people in real life situations. Like I've had so many times where people come and they're like black pill guys around, and the thing that holds the black pill guys back, they think it's their look. It's not. It's their fucking attitude. It's their attitude. They believe that because they're not physically attractive, and I don't have a cancel tilt, and I need to my jaw is too far forward, I need to fucking mew, and all of this bullshit, right? All this bullshit. Like, yes, do your best to look good, but don't think that's the most important thing. It's like they have, and oh, guys only go for chads, and I'll never have a woman, and it's like, that's a really fucking ugly, unattractive way to think and a way to be. And yes, you might have had experiences where you go up to women and you're like, hey, and they're like, oh, fuck no, right? If you're an ugly guy, that's going to happen. I'm sorry. Like, it sucks. It really fucking sucks. And I feel bad about it. And it's like, it sucks that we live in a world where aesthetics are so important, right? But you are also, if you can just push past that and ignore that and go, no, fuck you. I'm confident. I know I'm a good person. I know I have a lot to offer. And I know there are people out there that once they get past that will not care how I look, right? You could, like, I've seen, like, there was a guy on YouTube. I think his name was Never Give Up. And he was I think he was one of these black pill guys. And he's like, not a very attractive guy, right? And he was posting videos. His channel name was Never Give Up, and he had this attitude. He's like, yeah, I didn't win the genetic lottery, but so fucking what? I am deserving of love and affection and respect, and I think I'm a good person, and I'm going to go out and find that person. And from posting these YouTube videos, some girl, I think she was from Sweden or whatever, I can't remember, she posted under one of his videos, like, I don't think you're bad looking, I find you kind of cute. And then they ended up meeting up and getting married. I don't know where the story's gone now, maybe they're divorced, whatever. But the moral of this is, it's your attitude that affects the results that you get. If you're not a very attractive guy, or you're an objectively ugly guy, and you're like, well, that's going to hold me back. Guess what? It's going to hold you back, right? But if your attitude is, no, I'm worthy of love and respect, I work on myself, I'm a good person, and I'm capable of finding love and finding friendships and finding all of these things, and then you go out looking for those things, you will find them. I've been coaching for 4 or 5 years. The company that I previously worked with, I think, was started in like the 90s. Thousands of people have come through. I have never seen a single person, like, however they look or however their mental state, like some of them are autistic, like whatever. It doesn't fucking matter. If you're prepared to put in the work and you follow the advice that I give in the forums and in these things and whatever, and you actually take initiative and you build confidence, you go out and look for compatible people, you will get results. 100%. I fucking guarantee. Put a gun to my head and ask me if I'm telling the truth, and the trigger pulls if I lie. Abso-fucking-lutely. You will get results. It might take time. Some people, what happens in 2 days, some people it happens in 2 years. But if you take action, right, and you work on your shit and you have a good positive mental attitude about things, you will get the results. You will, 100%. I have never seen an example where this is not true. I've heard every fucking excuse under the sun. I've heard people, it won't work for me because of how I look. It won't work for me because I'm nervous. It won't work for me because I don't have a job. Like, bitch, I lived in a fucking tent. And by the way, like, I used to be less attractive. I was fucking covered in spots, terrible haircut, sleeping like shit, no muscle mass. I lived in a fucking tent in the woods. I washed in a river, and I had a girlfriend and friends. Why? Because I was a social, charismatic, happy guy, right? And that is the thing. The only thing that is actually important is who you are as a person. And if your attitude is, oh, I could never get that for XYZ reasons, you become internally ugly. And that's what repels people. It's the excuses that you make. It's the bullshit. It's the I can't do it. That's what repels people, right? I think that's a good place to end. All right. I have been Ben Campbell. This has been Off the Cuff. I'll be back next week at 5 p.m. local to Sofia, which I believe is Eastern European summertime at the moment. If you want to submit a question, it's discord.gg/self-improvement. There's a section there called submissions. You can either post a text question or you can ask to call into the show, and I'd really like it if people started calling in. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful week. And I'm going to ramble a little bit now so I can allow YouTube to catch up so that when I click end stream, it doesn't cut me off.